Consciousness is vast, reality is fluid, and what we call the paranormal may just be part of the human experience. We move through life searching for certainty, but every so often something happens that challenges what we think we know. A flicker of movement in an empty room, an intuition too strong to ignore, or a moment that lingers long after it's passed. Some call it supernatural, others call it psychological, but maybe it's both. I'm Mallorie, a therapist exploring the threshold between psychology, the supernatural, and the transformations that happen in between. Whether it's unexplained phenomena, personal awakenings, or the ways our subconscious and the unknown intertwine, this is a space to wonder, to question, and to explore what these experiences mean for us. Because what matters most isn't what we experience, it's how it transforms us. Welcome to the Liminal Mind.
You know that moment in every horror movie when the main character walks into a house they bought suspiciously cheap, and suddenly things start flying across the room? You sit there thinking, seriously, did you miss the part where the real estate agent practically ran out the front door? Yeah, me too. But beneath the Hollywood cliches of haunted houses and spooky music lies a fascinating and deeply human question. Can places or moments truly become haunted by strong emotions like grief or trauma? As a therapist, I've witnessed clients describe sensing loved ones long after their passing, or feeling inexplicable heaviness in certain locations. And while it's easy to laugh off the ghostly tropes from The Conjuring or tease someone for blaming lost keys on a playful poltergeist, these encounters can profoundly affect us. Today, on the Liminal Mind, we're stepping into that ambiguous space between psychology, grief, and the paranormal. Are hauntings just emotional echoes imprinted onto our surroundings? Could they be our subconscious minds searching for meaning and closure? Or perhaps something genuinely mysterious and unexplained? Join me as we explore real-life haunted locations, meaningful psychological theories, and the incredible stories we tell ourselves about these encounters with the unexplained. Because at the end of the day, maybe what truly matters isn't what is objectively real, but how these experiences transform us. But seriously, we joke about haunted houses, yet real-life experiences can be pretty intense, especially when they're connected to grief or trauma. Today we're talking about emotional hauntings. Grab your popcorn, double-check your basement door, and let's dive in. When grief visits. Paranormal encounters after loss. Have you ever felt the presence of someone you've lost long after they were gone? Maybe you've glimpsed them in the corner of your eye, heard their voice whisper your name, or even felt a comforting touch in your hardest moments. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. A fascinating 2008 study published by the Omega Journal of Death and Dying by Dr. Edith Steffen and Dr. Adrian Cole found that as many as 60% of people who have lost loved ones report experiences of sensing their continued presence. These encounters range from hearing familiar sounds, smelling scents associated with the departed, to vivid visions or dreams of the deceased. Psychologically, these moments are sometimes labeled as grief hallucinations, a somewhat clinical term for profoundly comforting and meaningful experiences. Mainstream psychology often frames them as a natural and healthy response, a way that our mind and body cope with the overwhelming loss. But the meanings that we create from these moments can stretch far beyond clinical explanations. For many, these paranormal encounters profoundly shape their grieving process, offering emotional healing, reassurance, and a deepened sense of spiritual connection. In pop culture, we see this idea explored beautifully within the Pixar film Coco. The movie portrays how Mexican culture honors ancestors through Dia de Muertos, believing loved ones continue to watch over and guide us after death. These cultural traditions aren't simply symbolic, they're also meaningful narratives that help communities cope with grief, loss, and memory. Similar cultural perspectives appear in many traditions worldwide. In Japanese culture, for example, the Obon Festival honors ancestral spirits believed to return annually to visit their families. Participants clean family graves, create altars, and release floating lanterns to guide their ancestors back to the afterlife. While spiritual beliefs differ across cultures, the common thread is clear. Human beings universally long to maintain connections. Within the African American tradition, there's a rich cultural history around feeling guided or visited by ancestors. Toni Morrison eloquently captured these experiences in her book Beloved, where the presence of spirits directly symbolizes unresolved grief, trauma, and the persistence of memory. But why does this happen? Dr. Jacqueline Hayes' 2016 research suggests that these encounters might represent adaptive coping mechanisms, helping the grieving feel supported during intense periods of emotional upheaval. Hayes argues that, far from being pathological, these visions or sensations serve as emotional anchors, guiding us gently through grief. As a therapist, I've personally seen clients gain profound comfort from these moments. Even when approached through my own therapeutic lens, rooted in narrative therapy and trauma-informed care, I see the value not only in validating these experiences, but also in helping people explore the deeper meanings they carry. I've also had my own experiences sensing departed loved ones. I vividly recall the feeling of the comforting presence of my grandmother in her home after she passed away. Psychology might call it emotional wish fulfillment, paranormal enthusiasts might call it genuine spirit communication, but honestly, the most important aspect wasn't the objective truth of the encounter. It was the peace and clarity that it brought me during a profoundly challenging time. In modern media, we often see grief as something to overcome, move past, or resolve quickly. But paranormal encounters after loss suggest a different path. A path of continued relationship, ongoing dialogue, and emotional depth. Instead of letting go, many find meaning in holding a continued spiritual connection, allowing their grief to evolve rather than disappear. Whether or not these experiences are objectively paranormal, their psychological and emotional value is clear. Viktor Frankl wrote, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. These paranormal moments often become that meaning. Transformative experiences that offer comfort, connection, and healing when we most need it." Trauma, emotion, and haunted places. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt something unsettling? A heaviness, a sadness, or perhaps an echo from something traumatic? Maybe you visited historical locations, like battlefields, museums, or abandoned hospitals, and felt something lingering that you couldn't quite put into words. Let's go a bit further. Can strong emotions actually imprint on places, creating what we commonly call hauntings? This idea has deep roots, both spiritually and psychologically. This brings us to the fascinating concept known as the stone tape theory. Proposed initially in the 1970s, the stone tape theory suggests that intense emotions, particularly those linked to trauma or violence, might somehow be recorded onto the environment, especially in areas containing certain geological properties, like limestone, quartz, or running water. These environmental elements are thought to act almost like natural storage, capturing emotional energy and replaying it back under the right conditions. Paranormal researchers speculate that these emotional recordings replay themselves as residual hauntings. But psychology also offers fascinating insights. Dr. Michael Jauer, in his book The Spiritual Anatomy of Emotion, argues that emotional trauma can resonate through time and space. He suggests that hauntings might represent lingering emotional energy, perceptible by sensitive individuals. Take Gettysburg, for example, the site of one of the bloodiest battles of the American Civil War. Thousands of visitors over the years have reported seeing apparitions of soldiers, hearing distant cries of pain, or sensing profound sadness when exploring the grounds. The paranormal activity at Gettysburg is often attributed to the extreme emotional trauma that unfolded there, a trauma that many believe literally soaked into the earth itself. In the same sense, places like Auschwitz concentration camp or the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. are often described by visitors as spaces where sadness, grief, and heaviness feel almost tangible. While historians and psychologists typically explain these sensations as empathic reactions or emotional resonance, paranormal investigators and enthusiasts have documented numerous unexplained encounters, apparitions, voices, unexplained shadows that suggest something deeper. A survey conducted by Horan and Lang in 2009 found that people who reported paranormal experiences at historically traumatic sites frequently described intense emotional sensations, overwhelming sadness, fear, or anguish seemingly arising out of nowhere. And it's not just locations linked to warfare or genocide. Abandoned hospitals or institutions where human suffering once occurred have similar reputations. Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky witnessed the deaths of thousands from tuberculosis in the early 20th century. Visitors often report shadowy figures, unexplained whispers, and overwhelming emotional heaviness. Many believe the intense pain, grief, and loss endured within those walls left emotional residues, imprints that continue to play themselves back under certain conditions. Some paranormal investigators even explore the idea that geology itself plays a role. Locations rich in limestone or quartz, both believed to have conductive or energy-absorbing properties, often seem to have increased reports of paranormal phenomena. For example, Edinburgh, Scotland, famous for its limestone foundations, reports particularly vivid hauntings in historic sites, castles, and underground vaults. But here's where psychology offers another layer. From a trauma-informed perspective, which is central to my therapeutic practice, we understand trauma isn't just psychological, it's physiological. Trauma affects our nervous systems, making us hyper-aware of our environment and incredibly attuned to subtle emotional and sensory cues. When we enter a place where suffering once occurred, our heightened sensitivity might help us pick up on subtleties others don't notice. The sadness, the dread, the inexplicable feelings. Could these sensations be a blend of emotional imprints and our own psychological attunement to pain? And from the lens of narrative therapy, which believes that our interpretations shape our experiences, the stories we tell ourselves about these spaces also deeply impact how we experience them. Knowing a location's traumatic past primes us emotionally and psychologically, potentially making us more likely to perceive something unusual. So, are these places truly haunted by spirits, or are we experiencing emotional echoes imprinted in the environment itself? Maybe both at the same time. While we might never know for certain, exploring these phenomena helps us better understand ourselves, our emotional landscapes, and how we make meaning from our interactions, especially with those places steeped in emotional history. One of my favorite psychologists, Viktor Frankl, said, "An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior." When we're confronted with something we can't explain, especially something that's unsettling or scary, our minds naturally seek to make sense of it. I've worked with people who have experienced paranormal events and traumatic losses or significant life transitions. Initially frightening, these experiences sometimes evolve into meaningful catalysts for personal growth. A 2009 study by Horan and Ling found that individuals reporting paranormal experiences after a loved one's death frequently described these encounters as deeply comforting, meaningful, or transformative. Far from feeling fearful, many participants said these encounters helped them move through grief, reestablishing a sense of ongoing connection. Through my own experience and therapeutic work, I've learned to honor the truth in these experiences, regardless of their objective nature. It's not about proving ghosts exist, but understanding the meaning these moments bring into our lives. At the heart of paranormal encounters, especially hauntings, is the question of meaning. Whether we sense a spirit, see a ghostly figure, or simply feel a strange sensation, our minds naturally seek explanations. This search for meaning is beautifully captured by Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and author of Man's Search for Meaning, who wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Paranormal experiences often sit precisely in this liminal space, a threshold between what we know and what we can't quite explain. In psychology, the meaning we create from a paranormal encounter can significantly impact our emotional health and identity. Dr. James Horan and Renz Lang's research in 2009 found that individuals who reported paranormal experiences at sites with emotional histories often described these encounters as profoundly transformative and even comforting or reassuring. Interestingly, their findings suggested that the subjective interpretations, the meanings people attach to these experiences, mattered far more for emotional health than whether or not the experiences could be scientifically validated. Carl Jung's theory of synchronicity also offers powerful insight here. Jung proposed that certain experiences, often labeled as paranormal, are actually meaningful coincidences, connecting our inner emotional states with external events. For example, seeing an apparition after losing a loved one could be understood as a deeply meaningful synchronistic event rather than a random hallucination. Jung believed these experiences could profoundly impact our psychological and spiritual growth. Paranormal researchers approach meaning-making differently. Parapsychologists like Lloyd Arbach suggest that hauntings and apparitions might result from what he calls PSI phenomena, experiences caused by psychic energy, telepathy, or emotional resonance. In Auerbach's view, paranormal activity might reflect the unconscious mind's attempt to communicate deep emotional truths or unresolved emotions. This aligns closely with transpersonal psychology theories, which integrate spiritual and transcendent aspects into psychological well-being. Transpersonal psychologists emphasize that experiences traditionally labeled as paranormal, such as visions, apparitions, profound spiritual encounters, can play a crucial role in personal transformation and emotional healing. Rather than pathologizing or dismissing these moments, transpersonal psychology encourages us to explore their deeper meanings. The framework for narrative therapy also resonates deeply here. Narrative therapy suggests that our identities and emotional well-being are constructed from the stories we tell ourselves. Haunted experiences often challenge or shift our personal narratives, prompting us to reevaluate beliefs about life, death, and spirituality, and the nature of reality. By working with these stories, rather than dismissing or fearing them, we gain opportunities for emotional resilience, insight, and meaningful growth. By working with these stories, rather than dismissing or fearing them, we gain opportunities for emotional resilience, insight, and meaningful growth. Let's return briefly to stone tape theory, a concept popular in paranormal circles. While controversial scientifically, stone tape theory proposes that powerful emotions literally imprint themselves on physical locations. If this theory holds even symbolic truth, it supports the idea that emotional intensity leaves a lasting mark, whether energetically, psychologically, or metaphorically. More recent psychological theories have connected paranormal experiences directly with trauma and emotional processing. A 2004 study by Tony Lawrence and Elizabeth Peters found that people who have experienced traumatic events are significantly more likely to report paranormal experiences afterward. From a trauma-informed therapeutic perspective, these paranormal encounters might represent our subconscious mind attempting to process trauma, create closure, or communicate unresolved emotional wounds. So we have two frameworks, psychological and paranormal. They may initially seem separate, but they become deeply intertwined upon closer examination. Psychology suggests that paranormal experiences might represent our brain's attempt at emotional processing, trauma resolution, or making meaning, while paranormal researchers suggest that these events reflect emotional energies, psychic sensitivities, or spiritual insights. Ultimately, both perspectives highlight one core truth, that these experiences have meaning. Whether we interpret a paranormal encounter as our subconscious seeking resolution, spirits reaching out to comfort us, or simply the unexplained calling us toward deeper understanding, the emotional impact can be profound. Our willingness to explore, rather than dismiss these experiences, can unlock deeper emotional insight, self-awareness, and transformation. Maybe the question isn't whether hauntings are real, but rather, what do these experiences reveal about us and our need for connection, understanding, and emotional healing? In therapy, I often ask clients to explore not just what happened, but what does it mean for you? When we talk about paranormal experiences on this podcast, we aren't just exploring strange stories. We're exploring stories that hold power, significance, and meaning. This idea resonates with my practice, especially narrative therapy, which emphasizes the power of stories. The stories that I carried, consciously or not, likely influenced how I interpreted those unexplained moments. My childhood experiences were not subtle. Shadowy figures, disembodied knocks, moving objects, lights turning on and off. These weren't small disturbances, but bold encounters that lingered in my mind, shaping my reality. Once you live somewhere haunted, your standard for what is scary changes. Now, creaky floorboards and flickering lights don't even register. Oh, footsteps in an empty room? Cool. Sometimes I wonder if these paranormal occurrences were emotional messages, powerful reminders from the universe to pay attention to something deeper. Trauma-informed psychology tells us our nervous systems remember intense emotional events, imprinting them deeply into our subconscious. Could the paranormal simply be our mind's attempt to communicate unresolved emotions? Honestly, even after years of psychology study and therapeutic practice, I don't have all the answers, but I've learned the importance of honoring multiple truths. Maybe those experiences were exactly what they felt like, something beyond a simple explanation. What I do know is this: those moments shaped my path profoundly. They led me to psychology, encouraged my spiritual openness, and gave me a passion for validating others' experiences. Paranormal, emotional, psychological, maybe these labels matter less than the meaning these experiences bring into our lives. But this podcast isn't just my journey, it's yours too. Have you ever felt an emotional imprint in a space? Experienced something paranormal after a trauma or loss that brought you comfort or insight? I'd love to hear your stories. Some of your stories will be shared in upcoming episodes as we explore how our emotional lives intersect with the paranormal. Thanks for joining me today, and remember to subscribe and review the podcast. It truly helps get the word out. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and keep exploring the unknown.